Hi, everyone. This is James. Welcome to my channel. Well, today I'm excited because I'm doing something new, something different. I have a guest, my beautiful soul brother, one of my longest friends and best friends who has joined me. It's Drew. Say hello, Drew.
Hi, everyone.
And the reason why I brought Drew on is because outside of the fact that he's one of the smartest guys that I know, he's certainly been along with me throughout my entire journey. And I found that as I am attempting to explain some more in-depth or concepts with multiple layers, and I try to do video after video, I find that it's too condensed. And that really takes a dialogue to try to unpack or unravel some of the key aspects that I think are needing to be highlighted or seen. And so I have Drew on for this one. And this topic is about the soul's blueprint, the cosmic blueprint, how we are expressing through our own blueprint, how the different personalities are created. And so there's so many layers to this, and it's come through so much during my meditations. And I've tried to do so many videos, and it was just, I think it just kind of fell flat because there wasn't as much context. So I've got my beautiful friend here to help intervene, to ask some more questions, to pull out all the information, which I hope is going to be a little bit more digestible for all of you. And of course, if you have any thoughts or questions, please leave them in the comment box. I think, the more questions there's a lot to unravel here, and I think there's many rabbit holes that we can go down, and I'm happy to go down all of them. So leave the questions and I'll make sure I do some follow-up videos. So, all right, Drew. So this is what's been happening. Over the last couple of weeks, I have been going into these meditations, and more information about the cosmic blueprint and the soul's blueprint has been coming through. And so let me just paint a picture for you for the first part that they've been showing to me, and then we'll see what kind of questions we have. So the first thing that they've shown to me is they say to zoom out, like go to the furthest zoom point that you can, and they took me into the void. And so I was sitting in the void, and which they refer to as the nothingness. And then within the nothingness, I saw this speck of light. And it was like a pinhole, smaller than a grain of sand in perspective. And they zoomed me into this speck of light. And then I went through it, almost like going through a tunnel. And I have goosebumps everywhere. As I went through this tunnel, that is where everything existed. That's where everything exists. And so first, what they had said is that how the nothingness holds the everything, the allness. And even though there was contrast in the color of black and then the white speck, they were saying, no, it was just a shade of the same thing. So that was like the first thing that was brought to my attention. I was like, and then the next thing, and I'll pause here, is that as they took me through this tunnel, which they said was this projection outward, that now it was this illusion that now all of these universes, all of these galaxies, all these planets, all of these beings were in this perceived separation from the whole in order to have the experience. And then they started to show me that these different universes all have their own intelligent energy that is kind of like in charge of the universe. For instance, like if you went to go build a brand new home from scratch, these energies create the architecture, they create the blueprints, they create like these types of finishes or this type of this over here. And so they're literally in charge of how they want to then create their own universe. And then of course it's from the what's above, so below, and then you have all these like micro iterations of that. So I want to pause there first and see if there's any thoughts or questions just with that part.
No, it's very clear. You're saying that that it's bigger than we ever thought. That all of the universes are in comparison to the void, what perceivably was a speck, and the void is obviously when we think about everything is the void, and that speck is everything, but we can't even conceptualize that because that goes far beyond our ability to imagine how far and wide it goes, because it's infinite, it sounds like.
Yeah. And yes. And what I thought was so cool about it, was that here we are, we have our own, we're souls, so we have a blueprint. All souls have a blueprint, and I'll go into this later. But then to just begin to think about, like, you have this cosmic footprint or blueprint that is the allness and the nothingness. And then from there, there are all these other blueprints, just sub blueprints, a sub blueprint that is a universe. And then that universe has its own architecture. It has its own mathematics. It has its own laws by which it's governed by. And then within that, there are all these galaxies, and there are these planets, and there are these beings that are all, like, just like us, a part of the roll up of each level as we go all the way up to the cosmic blueprint. And so when you begin to just think about that, when you begin to just try to wrap your head around all of the different layers that go into that, and that even when we are here on, this incarnation, everything is contributing up like the spiral to the master blueprint, and then everything is contributing down as well. And so everything is always working in harmony for its own growth and for its own evolution.
Yeah. Would you suggest that, because one would say, okay, if there's, all of these, let's just take universes as within the spec, and they all have their set of rules, as you brought up. Would you say that the foundational unifying thread between all of it that's in existence is creation, just like the nature of itself is creation?
I would say with that, and that's a great question. Well, yes, just creation expressing itself. So that is, yeah, I guess I would just simplify it as that, just creation expressing itself in all the different forms and ways. And what I also thought was so interesting is that there's no thinking, like there's no mental construct as it comes to many of these more evolved energies. Like, they're not thinking like, oh, this is the type of finish I want to have, even though I kind of alluded to that just for the example. It's more like this beautiful dance and play with, like, stardust over here, or this type of mineral over here, and how things just kind of come together to create. It's like this, just it's like a beautiful dance and waltz of how all of these energies just kind of come together to build, to create, to build and collapse, to create, to be destroyed, and then to create anew. And so, like, we don't have judgments in these types of energies. It really is like a dance is probably the best way to describe it, with how these energies all interact and create with each other.
So let's go to that, because this obviously conversation is about soul's blueprint, and then realizing that there's blueprints upon blueprints upon blueprints, and it's just architecturally from the macro to the micro. Then it would seemingly that there is an architect, or maybe a group of architects of souls. Was that ever discovered as to, like, where are the soul's origin points? Are they created from, the architects of this universe? And does each universe have its soul architecture? And can we dive into that? Like, what is a soul, and is an energetic representation of other forms that are dancing in other aspects of space and time?
So that's a really good question. And what has come through for me is that a soul is essentially an energetic representation of a blueprint, like of a container. And then through this blueprint, this energy is embodied. It is created in a specific form that has all of its own intelligence. It's almost like let's see what they're showing me. It's almost like if we said that, let's just say the color yellow was its own frequency, right? It just contained its own, there was nothing like the color yellow, even though I know there's various shades of yellow and stuff like that. But let's just say in general, the color yellow was its own color, and which it is. But I mean, like, as it relates to a soul. And then that yellow is encoded with its own intelligence. It has its own blueprint by which it exists. And that yellow is a reflection of the energy and the intelligence of that blueprint. That is how then it is reflected out or shown out into the world with how we see it. And that is the same way that it's shown to me as a soul, that there is creator energy. The creator energy comes together to then put certain characteristics, that's such a human word, but like certain, what would I even call it? It comes together to create, we'll just say certain characteristics, certain inputs, certain outputs, and then that creates the blueprint. And then this blueprint expresses itself as something, and then together with that expression is the soul. And so then there's this container that is created, and within this container, that is where the soul then expresses itself as an aspect of this blueprint through various personalities, which we'll get into in a second. So does that
Got
make
it.
Yeah.
Just to say that back to you so that I make sure I understand. So the blueprint itself is the very architecture of the soul. So just like we can have a blueprint of a building,
Yeah.
right? You can draw out that building in a blueprint and then say, okay, that's the representation of what this is in expression. And so the blueprint itself is kind of is the underlying architecture, and then that is the soul is the encapsulation of that architecture, and then that goes and expresses itself however it expresses itself, which I think we'll get into a little bit later in this conversation.
Yes. And I also think though that there are some layers to that I have not fully gone into. And it's like, and the question is that then is the soul first and then the blueprint's created? Or is the blueprint first and then the soul is created? And that I just don't have the answer to. I don't know. The way it came through initially was that it was more of this architecture, and then the soul is kind of an aspect of that architecture that's then expressed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if we think macro to micro, right? Because we are mini creators as human beings, and all beings are mini and micro creators. We look at to create through a planning process first. We think, what is it that we want to create? And then we go and create it. And like, it's almost like in feminine energy becomes expressed through masculine energy. That's my language more so, but it's the overall understanding in a nebulous idea of what it is, and then the expression of what it becomes in more of a concrete form. So it doesn't really matter, but it seems like there's an understanding, this is what we want, and then let's go, let it go be built through, like you said, creator energy.
Yeah, I think that was really beautifully articulated. The other aspect of this where it gets super interesting is that, and we're going macro to the micro. Now let's just say, here we are, and we have a soul. Our blueprint is an aspect of that soul. It is the foundation or architecture for that soul. The other thing that they said is that the blueprint is highly intelligent.
Mm.
So they had said, like, think of a supercomputer and it's beyond that, because this blueprint is constantly learning, it's expanding, it's evolving. In every situation, it is optimizing an experience for its own growth and evolution in every single experience. And that goes across all of the different, like the macro to the micro. In every situation, it's just expanding, it's growing, it's learning, it's creating, it's destroying, and it's never doing the same thing twice. There's never any situation, even with us as humans, there's never anything we do that is a duplicate, ever.
Right.
And if you start to think about that, that is like in all of existence, like literally when they say enjoy each moment, it is because each moment it's unique. There is no moment like the moment. And that just continues to express itself. And I won't go into like purpose, but that is why I've, been shown that, each moment is your purpose. It is like, how can you enjoy and how can you fully express in each and every moment, seeing the wisdom that moment provides for you.
Mm. Yeah, when you were talking, I think of the body, the human body. I like to bring these things down to like more of a understandable perspective from my point of view. And I think about the trillions and trillions of cells that make up this body, and they're never the same from moment to moment to moment, even just in the movement of white blood cells, red blood cells, but all of it together, that there's never exactly the same expression of this body in any slice of time. And every single slice of moment to moment to moment, it is different, whether I perceive that difference or not. So every moment is new.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, even when you start to think at a cellular level, I mean, it's hard to, I mean, you can, at least for me, I can intellectually understand it, but to really just understand like the complete mastery of divinity, like it is so far beyond my like comprehension, because it is so perfect that it almost seems like it can't be that perfect, but it is. Uh, and the other aspect that they showed, and so after they showed that you have this beautiful, super intelligent computer, basically it's your operating system, in which it's constantly learning, growing, and expanding. Then what they showed, I've got my little Rubik's Cube. I always love to tell some good examples from the Rubik's Cube. Um, that if we were to think about the blueprint, let's just say it's this Rubik's Cube, okay? And then within this Rubik's Cube, let's just say this is my blueprint. And then all of these different squares could be personalities by which I'm expressing. And I'll do totally another video about past, present, future lives, how they're all happening simultaneously. The answer is yes and no, but I'll explain that in a different video. And so if we start to think about that, then it's like, okay, my blueprint wants to learn about, it wants, and I shouldn't say wants to learn because it's already a part of the master mainframe, the master computer, but let's just say it's about surrender. And so this blueprint's like, one of the lessons I want to learn, or one of the deeper understandings or things I want to master, is about surrender. And so what it does is that it starts to, first off, it goes out into all the other blueprints and understands where the understanding is of surrender in all of those. And because none of these understandings are duplicates, they're all learning from each other, all of them. It's never something that is redundant in any way. And that goes for every lesson, every learning, everything. And so if surrender is one of them, now let's just say, all right, I'm going to twist this around a little bit. Okay, so let's just say that one of the personalities is James, the blueprint. I'm expressing as James through this blueprint. Maybe another one is Queen Elizabeth, and another one is Christopher Columbus. So right now, this blueprint, through these personalities, is learning, it's expressing, it's creating opportunities and experiences for its own growth and evolution. And so it's like, okay, for this understanding, I'm really going to lean into Christopher Columbus. So Christopher Columbus is born, maybe the blueprint, I don't know, maybe the blueprint's at like only 2% understanding of surrender. And it starts to then create experiences for Christopher Columbus to learn about surrender, or for the blueprint to learn through Christopher Columbus. So maybe one of them is Christopher Columbus was in some kind of relationship that he was attached to. And then one of the ways in which this relationship either ended or whatever was part of his ability to surrender. Another one might have been like with the ships coming to America, and there could have been some circumstances by which things were just so extreme, or maybe something happened, maybe there was no wind, whatever it was, that there was the only thing he could do was surrender. And so first there is the intelligence of the blueprint expressing through the personality of Christopher Columbus to then create these different experiences to learn about surrender. Now, where it gets just like beautiful is that, let's just say Christopher Columbus is now, he passed. And now the blueprint, based upon its understanding of surrender, got to maybe like a 10% capacity. And again, it's constantly growing at like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction, because it's also still learning from all of the other blueprints that are around it. So now Queen Elizabeth, she's born. And now for Queen Elizabeth, she comes out with, say, an 8 or 10% already understanding of surrender. It's just a part the blueprint knows, and part of her lessons and learnings. She already comes in now and understands surrender at a 10% capacity, not even knowing that. She just is birthed with that. And then through her own lessons and experiences, maybe that grows to like 30 or 40% capacity for the blueprint. Now, it's not happening in a binary way like that. The entire blueprint is expressing itself as it sees fit to learn about surrender across all the different personalities and incarnations by which it's expressing. And so literally it's growing and growing and growing and growing from all the personalities at like a fraction, a fraction, a fraction, in order for it to better understand what surrender is. And so I want to pause there and see if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, what you described was like a linear relationship between Christopher Columbus and Queen Victoria. And so that created a question, like, how do the personalities or the fractals influence each other? But you answered that because she showed up with already 10%. So I guess, is there a linear relationship, or is this an expression like, are all these, could all these personalities be expressing at the same time? In which case, that really makes me wonder, what is the relationship? How are they impacting one another? How are the other parts of my fractal or the James fractal impacting you as it's evolving, learning, growing?
Yeah, so it's definitely not linear. I was just using that for that example. It's for sure spread across the entire blueprint, all the different personalities, but specifically for how the blueprint feels, it is optimizing that deeper understanding. And so, like, this is where karma comes into play. And I'll give you another example. Let's just say, another lesson that the blueprint wants to learn is about, let's just say it's about forgiveness. And so in order to forgive, or for this blueprint to better understand forgiveness, there would be other personalities by which it's expressing through that maybe, and forgiveness is probably isn't the best, but we'll just go with it. That maybe surrender is not appropriate for them to have in their personality. And so what I mean by that is that in order to maybe learn forgiveness in a way of mastery for this blueprint, that means that some of the other expressions that are taking place as far as personalities and incarnations might not have the other lessons embedded in it. It might be completely different architecture or understanding for those in order to really capture what the essence of forgiveness is. And so it's literally that intelligent where it knows kind of where to spread across these different lessons and learnings. Now, lots of times we hear about karma, right? We hear about how we can carry some of these things in with us. And so maybe one of them was regret. And so maybe in order to first learn regret, let's just say we'll go back to Queen Elizabeth. She is going deep into her own experience and regret. She did something, and just deeply rooted in her essence was regret. And she died with it being regret. Well, in order for the blueprint to learn, it wants to make sure it for mastery, that would mean that you'd have to have experiences where you really felt like regret consumed you in one way or another. Now, in order to clear that, what can happen is that regret then can come through other personalities, just like in the same way that the surrender came through. Now regret can come through. And so someone might be born into an incarnation with 90% of capacity for regret. Not like regret, they're holding regret. And then it takes the opposite to happen, where you go through incarnation to then, once it's learned, part of the learning process is also how to move into it, how to see it, and how to then transmute it. So it goes in both ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it would indicate that it already knows what the final answer is. It would already know what surrender is. It would already know what forgiveness is in order to be like learning against it, because at some point that those lessons are complete. So there's an aspect that knows, okay, this is the target. So that's a question that I have is where is this understanding and knowing of what forgiveness is then through whatever it is, lifetimes and fractals and all these expressions across the cosmos, then it's like, okay, got it. We made it. It's done, and then, many, many months ago, you talked about dissolution. So is that also woven into the blueprint that there is a backdrop against that this is forgiveness, and we're going to go out and just go on that journey to then rise to that expression or that frequency? So it already knows, right? It already knows what it's, because otherwise it would never know whether it got there or not, whether it became the expression of forgiveness.
Yeah. I think what comes through for me is that it's almost like its curiosity is piqued. It's gotten to a point where it wanted to learn something at a certain level, and then it was like, okay, now let's go to this. And again, it's not happening so binary where it's like, okay, that's done and this is done. It's happening all simultaneously. But the answer is yes, because it would be like climbing a mountain. And you get to a point at the mountain and you're like, okay, I'm done. I see the view. The view looks amazing. I feel complete here. And then at the same time, they're like, okay, what's it going to be like going down the mountain? Maybe now, because the experience going down is completely different than going up. And so it's like the same thing of where you get to this point, you're like, you learn this. And then there's also this beautiful lesson as you go down. And that is the unwinding of these as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I got it. So I'm sure the audience wants to know, how do you find out what's in your blueprint? 'Cause that would indicate what you're here, like I suppose maybe a cognitive understanding and awareness of what the soul's journey is.
Well, that's where complete trust and surrender comes in, right? Because who wants to know? It's our mental body, it's our
Yeah.
ego. And the ego can never, you're never going to find out, what is in the blueprint because it's beyond the mind. But the blueprint is showing you in each and every moment what's in it by what's being expressed.
Mm.
And so that is where the key aspect of this journey comes into play. It's like, can we just allow the expression of the blueprint in each and every moment to come through? And can we honor that with so much joy and so much gratitude? It's only when the mental body comes into play that thinks we should be somewhere else, or we should be doing something else, or we should be achieving something else. That is when it just creates resistance to what is.
So can you talk about that? So like, how do we move in opposition to the blueprint, or can we move like in a resistive state to that blueprint? And how would we know? Is it more like a feeling in the body or an emotional sensation that we're kind of in the stream or traveling maybe against the stream, or is traveling against the stream part of the blueprint? How would you ever know?
Yeah, so that's such a great question. And it's all a part of the blueprint. It's all
Okay.
a part of the blueprint. Uh, because
So
again,
we
there's
can never
no,
we can never not fulfill the blueprint. The blueprint is always in operation, no matter what we do, even if we think we're not moving in alignment with it.
that's exactly right. Because even when you quote unquote resist, it's learning, it's
Yeah.
growing. It's like, oh, look at that. Look how that personality reacted to that. And now look how they're expressing, creating this new, like this new wisdom, this new information. So even through
So
that, it's perfect. However, as a human, I certainly can understand how it doesn't feel that way when we're in our human bodies, and we're like, it can be, at least for me, it's been formidable, like this experience, and very difficult. And I've been depressed before, like very depressed at different times. And, that's also when I've learned and grown the most. That is when I've expanded the most. That has been hands down, the most expansive states I've been in are the deepest and darkest ones that I've had to go and adventure into or journey into.
and that's a great word to adventure, to journey into, because you're exploring the frequency that we as humans call depression, but you're, a soul exploring that frequency. And then we call it heavy and dense and dark and all these words that we have to describe it. And it's not a desirable place to go and explore, but from the soul's perspective, it must be as delicious to explore that frequency as it is to explore the frequency of bliss. I imagine that there's no particular experience that it says that one's better, that one's good, and that one's bad.
Exactly. Yeah. There is no, every time I think of good and bad, right and wrong, better than, less than, that is so much an egoic construct, part of the genius of this creation of our experience. But it's also, when it comes to the blueprint, that is it's not there. It's obsolete. It's just not in play. This was just a lesson I learned yesterday, or that came through, which was really beautiful. Uh, I'd say, I mean, the last 9 years, but in particular, the last few months have been very formidable, like dense, really going through it. Like probably one of the more difficult times I've been through in a very long time. And last week, I don't finally feel like I know I made it through. Now, part of my old programming was, oh, I'm in the eye of the storm. I'm like, I'm just going to chill here. I'm like, oh, I don't want to go anywhere. I'm finally like made it here. I feel like I can breathe. And then like through one of my dear friends and mentors, it was reframed to me that it's like, no, James, can you take a moment first to honor your journey to get here? Can you honor not even just the last 9 years, but it was just my birthday, so the last 47 years, and everything that you did to get to this point. And it took me it took me a moment to really like honor myself in that way, just because of my own worthiness, and wanted to like accept that like I went through this journey, and yeah, it was not easy. And the first thing in my mind is like, oh, well, so many people have difficult journeys as well. Yes, they do. And It's important that we honor our own journey to get to this point. And then what was said was, can you see now how it's not that you're in the eye of the storm? It's now that you're learning how to dance within the storm. And that was like, I had goosebumps everywhere. And I was like, oh, you're so right. Because now how I hold different information and experiences, I don't have that friction as much anymore. And there's still, of course, stuff left, but it's different now. And as I move through to this new place, as this new door has opened, it's like using this ease and this grace and this peacefulness and using that to show up in every experience, and knowing that then it's about dancing in the storm. It's about dancing, and it's about dancing through all of it. And so I thought that was really beautiful.
An important question is, was I that dear friend and mentor? No, I'm just kidding. But what's
Always, always.
interesting is that, you know, I don't know if this is maybe, if this is moving off tangent, let me know. But the idea of free will, because it seems that the blueprint has set the architecture in place already. So it's seemingly that our free will is some illusion, but yet we're bound. And I don't mean that in a constrictive way, but we are operating in the construct or the confines of a blueprint in an expression. I'm just one of many, as I know is in my blueprint. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like what is the, you know, free will at the soul level, and then what we perceive to be free will maybe at the fractal or expression level or personality level?
Yeah, yeah. So it's both. And so, and what I mean by that is that the blueprint has certain aspects that it wants to learn. And those are encoded in a lot of its DNA. However, at the same time, it's also just like a learning algorithm, it's also learning new things at the same time. And so when it comes to experiences being expressed through these different personalities, there are situations by which that we are placed in based upon choice, our choice, based upon the collective choice, based upon consciousness. There's a many different factors that go into this. And then based upon all those things, experiences are then expressed. Things are then expressed through each one. Like that's how highly intelligent it is. So if I choose, instead of going left, I choose to go right. And then I choose to, I don't know, go to sleep at 6 as opposed to going to sleep at 10. And then just with those two choices, based upon the experience that's happening at that time or the circumstances, based upon who's around, a lesson or experience will reveal itself. Like it's just a natural part, just like the sun going up and the sun going down. It's constantly expressing itself in each and every circumstance based upon the choices that are made. And so there are lessons that you could call predetermined that are coming through always. And with the choices that we make, those lessons are just expressing themselves at different times. So maybe there was a lesson that I was going to learn if I went left, but instead I went right. So there's still a lesson I'm going to learn. It's just different than when I went left.
Yeah, so I mean, it's almost like you just described what fate is. It's like no matter what, if we choose left or we choose right, the same expression of the blueprint will unfold. So again, it almost feels like I have the illusion of free will because I'm thinking I get to choose left. And if I choose left, then the experiences down the right side of the fork will not happen. But it's not true. They just may happen in just, you know, different outcomes or different ways, but at the core, they still happen, whether I go left or whether I go right. So while I feel like I can make these decisions and I don't feel constricted by even, you know, the words, I feel like I'm choosing them right now in this moment, or even the way my body is moving, I feel like my mind is choosing these particular behaviors.
Yeah.
It does not matter. It's all within this expression that I made, that a part of me, you know, a macro part of me decided. And I would suggest that maybe I'm here more to learn why I decided that, or to experience those decisions in what we perceive as time.
Yeah, I mean, regardless, all paths lead to the same place, back home. All paths get to that place. That is for sure. That has definitely been shown to me. Doesn't matter which way you go, we're all going back to the same place.
So what does that mean? Can you describe that a little? When you say all, what's back home?
Back home is like back to source. So the way it was shown to me, if we were to take the same example of, let's just say now let's just say that this cube is the master blueprint. It is the allness.
Mm.
And so this allness, if you go into the center of it, let's just say it's whoosh, like everything is just expanded out, all of it. All of these squares, all these different aspects, universes, galaxies, beings, etc. Eventually, what's happening is it's going to come all the way back. All those pieces that we think are outside, that this internal like expansion from in that looks like it's projected outwards, all of those are coming back in. And the way it's been shown to me is that it just folds in on itself and then poof, disappears. Now, I'm not suggesting that there's not other creations and all that stuff for sure. But as far as how it's been shown, all the different choices, we are all playing our part. We are all contributing to that greater learning, because another way to say this is that in the same way that your blueprint has these lessons and learnings, that's the same thing that's happening at the master level, at like the creation level. It is just creating, it is learning. Now, when does creation get to a point where it's like, it's done? I don't think that ever happens. But I think that in the same way, there are certain universes that will collapse. There are certain galaxies that will collapse. It's almost like they're complete. It's like they got to the point where they were needing to go, and then they collapsed, destruction, and then new is created.
Mm.
And so it's the same thing with like a butterfly that only lasts, I don't even know, I think it's like a few weeks to a month. Like this beautiful expression, it's out there, but then when it's time, it's ready to go. And then a new cocoon, a new butterfly, etc. And so that is the way it's been shown to me. Like this universe, humanity, we do not last forever. We are just expressed in different ways. Our blueprint can then go and express in different energies and beings. Many of us aren't even, well, none of us are humans. We're just expressing as a human for this incarnation. But many of us have been many other things and are other things, just depending on the construct of time and how that's reflected.
Wow, that's amazing.
But we've been talking for a little bit, and I want to break this up into two parts. I want to close this one. Do you have any last questions? This has been a lot of information. It'll be interesting to see how the audience receives this. And again, the audience, if you guys have any questions or want to go further down any of these rabbit holes, because a lot of little doors were opened up here, please let me know. And then what Drew and I are going to do is that I'm going to cut this one off, do as part one, and then we're going to pick up in a part two and just do another little like 20 minutes discussion. So do you have anything else, Drew?
No, that was awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, my brother. And okay, stay tuned for part two.